I pulled into the gravel lot of the Blue Ridge Country Club in North Carolina, the engine of my 1994 Ford F-150 giving one final throaty growl before I cut the ignition. The truck looked completely out of place among the sea of polished Porsches and sleek Teslas, like a pair of muddy work boots at a black tie gala. But I didn't care. To me, this truck wasn't just metal and rust. It was a record of every mile I'd fought for since I started my first workshop in a rented garage 30 years ago. I stepped out, the door creaking just enough to let everyone know I'd arrived. My son-in-law, Jason, was standing near the grand entrance with 3 men in tailored suits, potential business partners for his logistics firm, Apex Streamline. I saw the exact moment he spotted me. His face didn't light up with the warmth of family. Instead, it tightened with a sharp, stinging embarrassment he couldn't hide. "Check this out, guys," Jason said, his voice carrying that practiced, loud tone he used when he wanted to be the center of attention. He gestured toward my Ford with a smirk that felt like a slap. "My father-in-law, Arthur, he refuses to let go of this relic. Honestly, Arthur, I'm surprised the club hasn't started charging you a disposal fee just for parking that eyesore here." The men laughed, those polite, shallow chuckles of people who didn't want to disagree with a potential lead. Jason leaned in, his eyes bright with the need to look superior. "You know how it is with the older generation. They hold on to the past because they're afraid of the future. But don't worry, once we close this next round of funding, I'll buy him something that doesn't leak oil on the fairway." I didn't say a word. I just reached into the truck, grabbed my worn leather jacket, and gave them a quiet nod. Jason didn't know that the eyesore he was mocking was the foundation of everything he possessed. He had no idea that the man he was dismissing as a relic was actually the primary investor in his firm. Before we get into how I handled this, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us tell these stories of justice and legacy. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 65 years old, and if you saw me walking down the street in my grease-stained Carhartt jacket and worn-out work boots, you'd probably think I was a retired handyman looking for a discount at the local hardware store. My neighbors in our quiet corner of North Carolina see me mowing my own lawn and tinkering with that old Ford F-150, and they assume I'm living off a modest pension and Social Security. I've never felt the need to correct them. My late wife, Martha, used to say that the man who needs people to know what he's worth has already told you he doesn't believe it himself. I believed her then, and I live by those words now. I spent 38 years building Vance Heavy Industries from the red dirt up. It started in a rented garage with a leaky roof and a set of tools I'd inherited from my father. There were years when Martha and I shared a single sandwich for dinner, so we could afford the high-grade steel we needed for a client's order. We didn't have a fortress fund back then. We just had grit and a refusal to fail. By the time I retired 3 years ago, that single garage had grown into a conglomerate with 3 manufacturing plants, a fleet of logistics vehicles, and a commercial real estate portfolio that stretches across the Southeast. But you wouldn't know that by looking at my driveway. That 1994 Ford F-150 isn't there because I can't afford a luxury SUV. I keep it because it's a record of a life well lived. Martha and I bought it together the year we finally paid off the mortgage on our first workshop. We drove it to the coast on our first real vacation, and I used it to haul the lumber for the porch she loved to sit on during those humid Carolina evenings. When Martha passed away 5 years ago from a sudden stroke, the truck became more than a vehicle. It became a sanctuary. Sitting in that cab, surrounded by the faint scent of old leather and the lingering memory of her laughter, is the only place where the silence of the house doesn't feel so heavy. I've built a life that fits me. I run 4 miles every morning before the sun hits the pines, and I still keep a tape measure on my belt out of a habit I don't care to break. I manage my assets through a shell company called Vance Capital Holdings. To the world, I'm just Arthur, the guy with the loud truck. To the boardrooms of the firms I've invested in, I'm a ghost, a silent partner who provides the foundation but never asks for the spotlight. Jason looks at me and sees a fixed income burden. He sees the rust on my fenders and assumes there's rust on my brain. He thinks success is measured by the logo on your key fob or the height of your office windows. He doesn't understand that a structure is only as strong as its foundation, and he's spent so much time polishing the windows of his life that he's completely ignored the cracks forming in the basement. He thinks I'm an obstacle in his path to generational wealth, not realizing that I am the very ground he's trying to build his castle on. Jason didn't just enter a room, he performed for it. When my daughter Sarah first brought him home 4 years ago, I saw a young man who was hungry for success. I respected that. I'd been that man once. But as the years went by, I realized Jason wasn't hungry for the work. He was hungry for the optics of it. He wanted the world to see him as a titan of industry before he'd even cleared his first million. He worked as a senior partner at Apex Streamline, a tech logistics firm that focused on disrupting the very industry I'd spent 40 years stabilizing. To him, my experience wasn't a resource. It was an expiration date. Jason lives in a house that costs more than some small-town budgets, located in a gated community where the grass is cut to a uniform 2 inches, and the neighbors only talk to you if you're driving something from this decade. He leases a Porsche 911 that he polishes more often than he calls his own mother. He dresses in suits that cost 3 of my monthly mortgage payments, and he carries himself with the aggressively confident stride of someone who has never truly felt the weight of a failing business on his shoulders. The pattern of disrespect didn't start with a bang. It was a slow erosion. It started with small comments at Sunday dinners, smirks about my simple tastes or helpful suggestions on how I could liquidate my acreage to fund a more appropriate lifestyle. Much like the son-in-laws in the stories you hear, Jason viewed my silence as a lack of understanding. He thought because I didn't argue with him about market fluctuations or cryptocurrency, I was out of my depth. "Arthur," he'd say, leaning back in my kitchen chair with that bored expression, "the world is moving faster than your truck can go. You're sitting on 80 acres of prime real estate that's doing nothing but growing grass and collecting property taxes. I've got a developer friend who could turn that land into a legacy for Sarah and the kids. You'd never have to worry about a thing again." He never asked what that land meant to me. He never asked about the trees I'd planted with Martha, or the fact that the soil he wanted to pave over was part of who I am. To Jason, everything has a price tag, and everyone has a utility. He started treating me like a liability, a ghost of the past that was haunting his bright, shiny future. He'd talk over me at events, introduce me as Sarah's dad, the retired contractor, and then move on to someone he deemed useful. I watched him. I watched the way he treated service staff, the way he puffed out his chest when he talked about Apex's upcoming Series C funding, and the way he looked at my old Ford F-150 with a mixture of pity and disgust. He was building a castle out of glass and mirrors, and he was so busy looking at his own reflection that he didn't see the cracks in the foundation. He didn't know that every series of funding he was so proud of was being signed off by a man he just called a relic. Stories like this remind us that real wealth is often hidden in plain sight. If you're enjoying Arthur's journey, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments if you've ever been underestimated by someone you helped. The drive home from the country club was quiet, the rhythmic hum of the Ford's engine providing the only soundtrack to my thoughts. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound sense of disappointment. It's a heavy thing to realize that the man your daughter loves is built on a foundation of sand and ego. When I reached the farm, I didn't go inside. I sat on the porch for a long time, watching the fireflies dance over the peach trees, and eventually, I pulled out my phone. It was time to stop being a ghost. I called Louise, my property manager at Vance Capital Holdings. Louise has been my right hand for over a decade. She's the kind of woman who can find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who dropped it there. "Arthur," she answered, her voice professional but warm. "I assumed I'd hear from you after the Apex quarterly report came in." "I haven't looked at the report yet, Louise," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But I need you to pull everything we have on Apex Streamline, every ledger, every internal audit, and specifically, the details of their Series C funding round. I also want you to contact Bill Thornton. Tell him we need to review the morality and ethics clause in our primary investment contract." Here is the truth that Jason never bothered to uncover. 2 years ago, when Apex Streamline was just a struggling startup with a good idea and zero capital, they were desperate. Sarah had mentioned their struggles over dinner, her eyes tired from worrying about their mortgage. I didn't want to just hand them a check, I wanted Jason to earn it. So, through a series of shell companies and Vance Capital Holdings, I became their lead investor. To Jason and the rest of the board, I was just a digital signature on a wire transfer, a silent partner based in Raleigh who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. The next morning, Louise sent over a digital folder that made my blood run cold. Jason wasn't just being arrogant, he was being reckless. The numbers he was showing to potential new investors were padded. He was inflating the firm's user base and projecting growth that didn't exist, all to secure a massive buyout that would solidify his status. He was gambling with the company's future, and by extension, Sarah's future. But the biggest irony was the big investor Jason was courting for the Series C round. He'd been bragging to Sarah about a major conglomerate that was interested in taking Apex to the national level. He didn't realize that the conglomerate was a subsidiary of my own holding company. He was literally trying to sell me a lie using my own money as bait. I spent the afternoon with Bill Thornton in his office in downtown Charlotte. Bill looked over the evidence of Jason's financial manipulations and shook his head. "Arthur, this is a clear breach of the investment covenant. You have the right to call in the debt, dissolve the board, or remove the primary officers immediately. He's been playing a dangerous game." "I know," I said, looking out the window at the city skyline I'd helped build. "But I want him to show his hand first. He's scheduled a final board meeting for Thursday to finalize the deal with the lead investor. He thinks he's about to become a king. I think it's time he learns what it's like to stand on his own 2 feet." I realized then that the old Ford F-150 wasn't the only thing Jason had misjudged. He thought I was a man who had been left behind by time. He didn't understand that I was the one who kept the clock ticking. This is where things start to get real. If you want to see how Jason reacts when the truth finally comes out, make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a Team Arthur in the comments below. The headquarters of Apex Streamline was a monument to glass, steel, and unearned confidence. It sat in the heart of Charlotte's financial district, a place where everyone looked like they were in a race they were winning. As I pulled my 1994 Ford F-150 into the visitor executive spot, the security guard actually stepped out of his booth, looking like he was about to tell me I was lost. I just gave him a look, the kind of look you develop after 40 years of managing men who move mountains, and he stepped back. Up on the 24th floor, the boardroom was a cathedral of modern business. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a view of the city that Jason clearly thought he owned. I could see him through the glass doors. He was in his element, pacing like a peacock, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first 3 delivery vans combined. He was laughing with the CEO, Marcus Thorne, and 2 other board members. They were waiting for the principal partner from Vance Capital Holdings to arrive and sign the Series C funding that would save their over-leveraged lives. I didn't knock. I just pushed the heavy glass doors open. The sound of my work boots on the polished marble floor was like a hammer hitting an anvil. Jason froze. The laughter died in his throat. His face went through a terrifying spectrum of colors, from surprise to deep, burning embarrassment. "Arthur," he hissed, stepping toward me to intercept me before I could reach the table. "What the hell are you doing here? Did Sarah tell you I was here? Look, I don't have time for a family emergency or whatever this is. We are in the middle of a multi-million-dollar closing. Get out, now." I didn't stop. I walked right past him to the head of the mahogany table and set my stained ceramic coffee mug down next to his pristine iPad. "Security!" Jason shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "We have an intruder! Someone get this man out of here!" "Sit down, Jason," Marcus Thorne said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of someone who had just realized the floor was disappearing beneath him. Marcus was looking at me, and then at the leather folder under my arm. "Marcus, he's my father-in-law," Jason scrambled, turning to the CEO. He's not well. He's retired. He's confused. I'll handle it, I promise." "I said sit down," Marcus repeated, his eyes fixed on me. I looked at Jason, truly looked at him. "You told your friends at the club that I was a relic of a bygone era, Jason. You said I was an eyesore. You told them I was holding on to the past because I was afraid of the future." I pulled a small digital recorder from my pocket and set it on the table. I pressed play. Jason's own voice filled the boardroom, loud, arrogant, and mocking from that afternoon at the country club. "Buy him something that doesn't leak oil on the fairway." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Jason looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "I'm not afraid of the future, Jason," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'm just the man who pays for it." I opened the folder. "My name is Arthur Vance. I am the chairman of Vance Capital Holdings. I own 62% of the initial equity in this firm, and I am the lead investor for the Series C round you were so excited about. Or rather, I was." I slid a document across the table, not to Jason, but to Marcus. "This is the result of an independent audit my team conducted over the last 48 hours. It shows a systematic inflation of user acquisition costs and a direct manipulation of the logistics margins. All of it traced back to Jason's department. It seems my son-in-law was so desperate to look like a genius that he forgot how to do basic math. Jason tried to speak, but no sound came out. He looked at the board members, then back at me. The aggressively confident man was gone. In his place was a terrified kid who had been caught playing with things he didn't understand. "The Series C funding is withdrawn," I announced, and the words felt like a final judgment. "Effective immediately, Vance Capital is invoking the control and morality clause in our investment covenant. We are calling for an immediate restructuring of the board. And as for you, Jason," I picked up my coffee mug, "you were right about one thing. That truck does leak a little oil, but unlike your career, it has a solid frame. You're fired. Get your things. And don't worry about the Porsche. The lease is in the company's name. I'll make sure it's returned this afternoon." I turned and walked out of the boardroom. I didn't look back to see the wreckage. I had work to do and I had a truck to drive. If you've ever enjoyed seeing a bully get exactly what they deserved, please subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep bringing you these stories of quiet justice. The fallout was swift and clinical. Within 48 hours, the board of Apex Streamline had voted unanimously to remove Jason from his position. The Series C funding didn't just vanish. It was placed under a strict probation, contingent on a complete forensic audit and a total change in leadership. Jason was out. There was no severance package, no polished exit interview, and no thank you for his years of service. Just a cardboard box of personal effects and a security escort to the parking lot where his leased Porsche was already being flagged for repossession. I sat in my kitchen that evening, the farmhouse filled with that particular heavy silence that follows a long overdue storm. Sarah was sitting across from me at the old oak table. She wasn't crying, but her eyes had a distant, hollow look that hurt me more than any insult Jason could have thrown my way. I pushed a mug of tea toward her, plain black tea, the way her mother used to brew it when the world felt a little too loud. "Why didn't you tell me, Dad?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. "You let him walk all over you for years. You let him humiliate you in front of people who mattered to him. Why keep the investment a secret?" I looked at the grain of the wooden table, the same table where I'd helped her with science projects 20 years ago. "Because, honey, if I had told you what I was doing for him, you would have seen him through my eyes, not yours. I needed you to see him for exactly who he was when he thought no one was looking. I needed to know if he was a man who respected the hands that built the ladder he was climbing. Love shouldn't be about ignoring boundaries. It should be about the honesty of them." A few days later, Jason came to the farm. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit this time. He looked smaller, his shoulders slumped in a way I hadn't seen since the day I first met him. He stood in the kitchen doorway, the same spot where he'd once stood and suggested I sell the land because it was useless. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Arthur," he said, his voice stripped of the performance. "I realize now I didn't even know who you were." I leaned against the counter, running my hand along the surface I'd built with my own hands 30 years ago. "That's the mistake you made, Jason. You looked at my clothes and my truck and decided you'd read the whole book. But you didn't just underestimate me. You underestimated everyone like me. You were so busy polishing the glass towers of your life that you forgot something fundamental. The entire infrastructure of the life you think you built yourself, the roads, the buildings, the very wealth you were chasing, was built by people you never thought to ask about." He didn't have a comeback. For the first time in 4 years, he was actually listening. I sat on my front porch that evening, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and North Carolina pine needles. Down in the driveway, my 1994 Ford F-150 sat under the soft glow of the yard light. Its paint was faded, and there was a new scratch on the tailgate from hauling lumber last weekend, but the frame was as straight and solid as the day it left the factory. To a man like Jason, this truck was a failure, a sign of being left behind. To me, it was a reminder that you don't need a polished exterior to carry the heaviest loads. Jason is starting over now. Without the leased Porsche, without the inflated title, and without the hollow lie he had been living. Sarah told me he finally took a job at a mid-sized logistics firm, not as a senior partner, but as a coordinator. It's a long, humble road back, but for the first time in his life, he's actually earning his way instead of performing it. My daughter seems lighter, too. She's rediscovered that the Vance name doesn't just come with a legacy of wealth, it comes with a backbone, I've learned that life is a lot like structural engineering. You can spend all your time on the aesthetics, the glass walls, the shiny logos, and the expensive suits. But when the ground shifts, and it always does, those things won't save you. Only the foundation will. I'm just an old man with a loud truck and a tape measure on my belt, but I know exactly who I am. I'm the man who built the ground everyone else is standing on. And as long as my heart keeps beating and my truck keeps turning over, I'll keep building. If Arthur's story reminded you that true worth is earned through quiet work rather than loud talk, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell us in the comments about a time you had to stand your ground. Thanks for watching and stay steady.